Looking back, I feel so foolish. I should have known better. The apartment was way too cheap, even for a small studio. There had to be something wrong. The day I moved in is all a blur. I insisted on doing everything by myself because I didn't want my family to think badly of me. By late afternoon, my body was aching and my head hurt a lot. I lay down on my bare mattress, staring at the ceiling fan with tired eyes. I wiped the sweaty strands of hair from my forehead, feeling disgusted with myself. Suddenly, someone knocked on my door. I jumped up, scared. I muttered a curse under my breath and pushed myself up on my elbows. Two girls were standing in the doorway, peeking inside. I had left the door wide open by mistake. I remembered an old college rule: only leave your door open if you want to make new friends. But I wasn't in the mood for that. One girl, with short black hair, was smiling at me. The other girl stood a bit behind her, holding a pack of cigarettes and twisting her long red braids. "Hey," she said, her voice both smooth and rough. "Did you just move in?" I lay back down, rubbing my face, not wanting to be polite. "Yeah, about 5 seconds ago," I replied. The girls walked in, ignoring how I clearly didn't want company. The girl with black hair ran her fingers along the edge of my desk and picked up a small ceramic duck from my unpacked box. "Grandma," I said, feeling strangely defensive. "Cute," she replied, holding the duck up to her face. "Has anyone told you yet?" the other girl asked, looking around my apartment. She tucked the cigarettes into her jeans and tugged at her braids. "We need to talk," she said. I stared at the two strangers, confused and scared. I hadn't even had time to put toilet paper in the bathroom, and now they were touching my things and talking about me like I didn't exist. All I wanted was to take a nap. "My name's Odin," I said. The girl with the red braids, Jana, sat down next to me on the bed. "Did they tell you?" "Tell me what?" she asked. "Oh, of course they didn't. The rules," I replied, blinking in confusion. I didn't know about any rules except the usual ones for renting. I had signed the lease quickly, barely reading it. The landlord was a skinny woman who smelled like ashes and never smiled. I didn't ask any more questions, especially since the rent was so cheap. The other girl laughed nervously. "Where did you move here from?" I ignored her. "What rules?" Jana had a strange, wicked smile and bounced a little on my mattress. The other girl sighed loudly. "Something happens here every night," she began, pulling out a shaky office chair and sitting down. "Something weird." "What?" I sat up, frowning at her. My interest was now piqued. "Like what?" "She walks down the street," Jana said, her voice like a camp counselor telling a scary story by the bonfire. "She's different every night. They scream for help for about an hour, but we're not supposed to help them." I felt a chill run up my spine. "Honestly, my name's Arden," I said again. "They never know when she's coming," the other girl added softly. "We never know why." I shook my head. "I don't believe you." Jana shrugged. "You don't have to. You'll see for yourself." Her eyes were serious, and I wanted to believe her, but it was all too strange. I thought maybe it was a prank or some kind of hazing. "We'll come back later," Jana said. "We'll show you." Before I could say anything, she grabbed the other girl's wrist, and they left. I followed them to the door, watching them walk down the hall and talk quietly. I closed my door behind them. That night, as promised, they came back with two boys. One was tall and muscular, wearing a tight black t-shirt and baggy jeans. He had a silver heart-shaped locket around his neck. "I'm Will," he said, smiling at me. The other boy was smaller and looked nervous, with short hair and loose cargo shorts. "I'm Matteo," I was told. Jana brought in a bottle of wine and a crumpled box of cigarettes. The other girl, whose name I still didn't know, looked apologetic. They all sat down on the dusty floor next to the window and invited me to join them. I sat between Will and the nameless girl, feeling unsure about trusting my strange neighbors. "Do you all live in this building?" I asked, hesitantly accepting the wine. "Yeah," Will answered with a half-hearted grin. "This building is where all the young people live. It's where they put us." Jana took a cigarette and lit it. "We've all been sorted out," she said. "Forgive her. She's a bit of a conspiracy theorist. Look at the others next door," she snapped, pointing out the window. "Middle-aged people with kids but no grandkids. Old people. Not a single 20-something in the entire building." Her name was May. I admired her smoky eye makeup and how she tied her hair up, with long strands sticking out like exploding fireworks. "Stop it, May," she muttered, reaching for the wine bottle. "You'll scare her." "I'm not scared," May shrugged, looking at me as if she didn't believe me. We passed the bottle around, and I listened to them laugh and argue. It was clear they had been friends for a long time, and I felt like an intruder, even though they were in my apartment. Will asked if I went to college, and I said I did but dropped out. They nodded sympathetically, making me feel stupid. By midnight, I was a little tipsy, and my guard was starting to drop. It felt nice to have friends. I had already accepted that I might be alone forever, but now that might not be true. I laughed at Matteo and Jana's drunken argument, passing a cigarette back and forth with May blowing smoke out the open window. I had almost forgotten why they were all here. Then, suddenly, all our phones started ringing loudly, like an emergency alert. The sound echoed through the neighborhood, hundreds of phones going off at the same time. I jumped, scared. Jana didn't laugh. Everyone went quiet and looked at me. I took out my phone and saw a message. "Do not interfere. It's coming," Will whispered, his eyes looking glassy and his voice shaky. Matteo squeezed my shoulder. May was worried, stubbing out our cigarette against the windowsill and backing away. A chill ran down my back. Something felt very wrong. The others stared silently at the window. I sat up, feeling like the air was warmer and buzzing with something strange. We stayed there, not moving, for what felt like half an hour. Just as I was about to ask what was happening, I heard a cry. It was far away and faint, but it kept getting closer and louder. "Help, please," someone cried. I leaned out the window to see. My apartment was on the 4th floor, so it was hard to see. Through the flickering streetlights, I saw an elderly man. He was hunched over, wearing only a hospital gown. Blood dripped from him, but I couldn't see where it was coming from. "Please, I'm hurt," he whispered. "What is this?" I demanded, looking back at the others. May touched my arm, trying to calm me down. "Arden, please, we have to help him." "Why can't we help him? He's just an old man," I argued. "Trust me," she said firmly. I ignored her and leaned out the window, ready to call out to him. But before I could speak, I froze. The man was looking right at me. I felt cold, like I was falling into ice water. "Help me," he whimpered, then screamed a horrible, inhuman scream. His arms were missing, replaced by bloody stumps. He didn't move, just shook and stared at me. "Please, please," he begged. May yanked me back, and I landed hard on the floor, yelping in pain and horror. "What is that thing?" I whispered. "We don't know," May replied, her eyes on Will, who was crying. "We just know to follow the rules." What happens if you don't follow the rules? I asked, and immediately regretted it. Will sobbed softly. The old man's scream filled the night air, and Jana pulled the window shut, but the terrifying sound still echoed. Do you want to tell her or should I? Matteo asked Will. Will shook his head, clutching his locket. Nothing, he said sadly. A couple of months ago, one of them got to Will's girlfriend, Shannon. I'm sorry, Will said. Her name is Shannon. I swallowed hard, feeling a lump in my throat. What happened? I asked. We don't know. Matteo shook his head. We were all together when the screaming started. Usually, we ignore it, but that night, Shannon saw something different. She insisted on helping and ran outside. We couldn't stop her. I pressed my lips together, trying to understand. I thought you were messing with me, but I saw it. I was scared. May shrugged again. People don't leave because they can't afford it or they don't care. Some have left, but we all signed an NDA with the lease. Nobody knows. I frowned, remembering signing the paperwork. I had just thought it was regular renting terms. I didn't know about any NDA, I said. I told them I wanted to go to bed, I said. I needed time to think. They understood and said goodbye, leaving me alone in the dark. As I lay in bed, I thought of May's scared face when we saw the man. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next few weeks were hard. I spent more time with my neighbors and realized they were right. There wasn't anyone over 30 in our building. Settling in was tough, but the others seemed used to it. They cared, especially Will, but you could tell they had been here a long time by the way they closed the blinds and focused on their tasks. I started copying them, pretending it was normal. Moving out wasn't an option since I was still a college dropout with no job, living on my savings. Every night, different people came to the building. Some looked human, others were drenched in blood with ripped clothes. The worst were the children. They ran around like scared chickens, banging on doors and begging for help. They said things like, I'm coming, I don't want to die, and I'm sorry. Many children appeared, and one night, while I was half asleep, an alarm went off outside. It wasn't like the phone alert, it was loud and muffled by my window. Red lights flashed outside. Too scared to look, I covered my head with my pillow and tried to sleep. Jana had her own theories. She thought we were all chosen to live here for some sick government game. Maybe people were betting on which buildings would interfere the least. She told me once that there were cameras everywhere. I didn't know if I believed her. I spent time with May, mostly smoking on the front steps while people watched. It was strange to see how dark and scary the neighborhood was at night, but bright and lively during the day. We didn't talk much about the rules, just enjoyed each other's company. One night, we were celebrating May's birthday. May walked in with a chocolate cake covered in sprinkles and pink icing that said, Happy birthday, May. We laughed and ate cake, then went to different bars to celebrate. Matteo drove us in his car, music blasting loudly. It was weird but fun. We danced under purple lights, took shots, and had a good time. At the third bar, we went into a photo booth. Jana made us pay $5 to take pictures. We laughed with red faces as the camera flashed. After the photos, we tried to leave, but May grabbed my wrist. You never gave me a birthday present, she whispered, her breath warm on my face. Before I could answer, she kissed me. It felt nice, but then something went wrong. Will called out to me, squeezing through a crowd of men in tattered jackets. Arden, where's everybody else? I looked around, but they were nowhere to be seen. What's up? I asked. He looked worried, sweat on his forehead. He showed me his phone. The time was 1:47 a.m. "Can we find the others and go?" he asked. I understood he was scared it was late, and the alarm hadn't gone off yet. We left the bar with Will and I, Matteo driving us back. It felt tense this time. Matteo's music was quiet, and no one was joking or talking loudly like before. We all felt something was wrong. As we drove, our phones went off again. Jana let out a small scream from the back seat. "Do not interfere," she said. Matteo pressed his finger to his lips. "Has this ever happened before?" Will looked scared. "No, it's different now. When I was in my bedroom, I felt so small and helpless, like we were all flies in a spider's web." Will slowed the car, and we all sat silently, not moving. Under the glowing streetlights, I saw Will's pale face as he looked down the street. A shadow moved toward us, walking shakily and limping. "Help me," it called out, sounding like a girl. It was wearing a white nightgown, covered in dark red blood. I knew it was Shannon, Will's girlfriend, who had disappeared. "We have to help her," Will whispered, but Motto grabbed his sleeve. "Don't do it," he pleaded. Shannon got closer, her face streaked with gore and her eyes hollow. She cried, drool dripping from her mouth, but no tears came out. Before we could react, she lunged at us. Will tried to open the car door but couldn't. The girl screamed loudly, more terrifying than before. The street lights flashed red, and Motto threw himself into the driver's seat, speeding away. Jana screamed, and May wept, holding onto me tightly. As we drove away, I looked back and saw a van flashing red lights around the corner. Weeks passed, and none of us spoke much after that night. We tried to call the police, but nothing happened. Whatever this was, it was bigger than we could understand. I decided to move back to my parents' house next week, despite their nagging, to figure out what to do next. I still don't know if that was really Shannon or something else. Last night, I heard Will's voice outside my window, crying for help. I didn't interfere.